Hey guys, let's take a look now at the top 20 players in fantasy basketball over the last 2 weeks. Of course, this is on a per game basis, looking at the standard 8 categories across fantasy basketball. The number one player over that time frame is Kevin Durant, who has played 39 minutes per game. Only one of those games was alongside Steph Curry, so you can expect these numbers to come down. He's averaging 39 points, 10 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 2.5 threes, 2 blocks, shooting 53 and 95%. An absolute monster couple of weeks for Kevin Durant. But as we saw, even in that first game back with Steph against the Pistons, Durant's numbers did drop back down. So you can see him, going back to that number 3 to 5 type of range rather than being right up the top here. The next two guys, Anthony Davis at number 2 and Jim Harden at number 3. No one's surprised there. Davis averaging 29.5, 13.5, and 4.5 with 2 steals and 2.5 blocks, which would be the number one player in pretty much any other 2-week period outside of Kevin Durant's big performance. And then Jim Harden, who, again, his numbers averaging 35, 6.5, and 11 with 2 steals and 4.5 threes. That would also be the number one performance in generally any sort of 2-week period. So those three guys are just significantly ahead of everybody else in terms of looking at their overall Z-score value for that time. Durant's at a 1.94, Davis at 1.82, and Harden at 1.81. And then the next guy is Giannis Antetokounmpo at 1.35. So that is a huge, huge difference. Antetokounmpo comes in at number 4, averaging 31.5 points with 14 rebounds. Brook Lopez is really helping him in terms of getting rebounds. 7 assists, 2 steals and a block with 62% from the field. But of course, the thing that's always dragging him down are the free throws. 71% from the line, which you might say isn't terrible, and it's not. League average is about 78%, so it's significantly below that. But he's taking 11 attempts per game, which puts him at a -2 Z-score for that category. If you do go into the punt free throw type rankings, which of course you can do on basketballmonster.com, Giannis rises to the number 2 overall player, just behind Anthony Davis over these last 2 weeks. But he is starting to get his shit together. It's a slower start for Antetokounmpo, but those free throws are a real concern, and you're basically going to be losing that category most weeks that you have him in your lineup. The number 5 player, I think, would be a surprise, as would number 6. Clint Capella in at number 5, averaging 21 and 13.5 with over 3 blocks on 72% shooting. They are big numbers. Now, the thing that really illustrates the importance of volume in the percentage categories, his negative impact on free throws is much less than what Antetokounmpo's is. In fact, Antetokounmpo's negative free throw percentage impact is double what Capella's is. Capella shoots 67, Antetokounmpo shoots 71%. So Giannis the better shooter, but because he takes almost 4 times as many attempts, he is a bigger burden on your free throw percentage. So that is important to note when looking at these these things. It's not all just about percentage; it's about volume as well. Capella at some point is going to not play 36 minutes a night. I would expect Nene is back. Not that Nene is all that great, but I don't think that Clint will keep this level up. But he could very easily remain a top 20 player. Marc Gasol, another surprise at number 6. 39 minutes a game over his last 7, 21 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 2.5 blocks, 1.5 steals, elite efficiency. Struggled in his last game, but prior to that, he'd been putting up really, really good numbers. I think in the top 10 is a stretch for Gasol. Top 20 maybe. As we move on for the rest of the season, it's all going to depend on that efficiency, which was quite down last season, but it's taken a big jump up. Number 7 is another big man, Nikola Vucevic of the Orlando Magic, averaging 22.5 points with 12.5 boards, hitting over a 3, 4.5 assists, almost a steal and a block on 55 and 91. And with all these big men in the top 7 here, outside of Capella, they're all averaging a lot of assists. Davis 4.6. Gasol 4.1, Vucevic 4.5. So that is becoming a really important factor for big men to rise up the fantasy basketball rankings. Clint Capella is not there with his 1.3 assists. But those other guys are all distributing the ball at pretty decent levels, and the steals as well. 1.4 for Gasol, 2 for Davis, and 0.8 for Vucevic, along with their elite efficiency numbers. I do think that Vuce is going to drop down. I am less and less sure that he is going to be traded, and I don't think that if he remains on Orlando that his minutes will drop. I don't think that it'll be a case of, now it's time to give Mo Bamba the role. I think the Vucevic role, as long as he stays in Orlando, which I think is becoming more and more likely, will remain. Only one game for Steph Curry over the last 2 weeks, but it was good enough to put him at number 8. He had 27, 5, and 3 with 2 steals in that game. He will hover in this 3 to 7 type range for the rest of the season. Very little to talk about there, but at least he's back, and he played 37 minutes in his first game back from that groin injury. Mike Conley at number 9, another really surprise guy in the top 10. 25.5 points with 4 rebounds and 8.5 assists, 3 threes, and over a steal per game. He was a guy that used to get 2 steals per game, but that's really dropped off. I took Conley in a ton of leagues this season. I was really big on him bouncing back. I was able to get him in the 50s and 60s in some drafts, 40s in some others, and he has clearly repaid that. Doesn't look to be bothered at all by that heel issue that cost him all of last season. He is really rolling, and nothing about that line that Conley's putting up, maybe the 31% usage, but there's no other usage hogs on this team. 25, 4, and 8.5 with a steal on 45 and 87, including 41% from 3. Maybe you say, okay, the usage at 31% is a bit high. The 8.5 assists are a bit high, but nothing else is extraordinarily crazy there to think that there's going to be a huge drop-off from Conley. I don't think he'll be a top 10 player, but I think he's going to really solidify himself as that second round, maybe start of the third round type of a player. The fun guy, Kawhi Leonard, comes in at number 10, averaging 27, 8.5, and 2.7. He's still got really big scope to improve his assists, but I just don't think it's happening in Toronto. We saw that start to blossom a little bit in San Antonio, but it hasn't really carried north of the border. So maybe we should, temper our expectations there, but he has been really strong. Well, Russell Westbrook is number 11, 22, 12, and 11, averaging the triple-double over the last 6 games. 1.8 threes and 1.8 steals. The free throws, there's still an issue. 63% for Westbrook on 5 attempts. This is 2 years in a row where he just cannot shoot the free throws. It's very, very confusing that he just has lost that ability. I don't know what it is. And at this point, I think we just have to assume that he's just going to be bad at that category. It's weird. Rounding out the top 12, Damian Lillard, 37 minutes over the last 7 games, 28, 4, and 6.7 assists, almost 4 triples, over a steal, 44 and 83, and those numbers, they're realistic for Lillard. So this is about his range, and that's about his level of production, nothing up or down there. A guy who is a real surprise is Paul Millsap. I was pretty down on Millsap hitting into this season, and he started off quite shaky. In only 28 minutes a night, he is averaging 16 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 2.2 steals and 1.2 blocks on 60 and 79%. He was named the Western Conference Player of the Week as well. Kawhi won the Eastern Conference Player of the Week. There are a few things there with Millsap which are unsustainable. He's shooting 46% on threes. 2.2 steals in 28 minutes is unrealistic. 1.2 blocks, maybe that's a bit high. And there's 60% overall from the field, and even the 79% from the line. These are all numbers which I expect to drop for Millsap, so it's a great performance here, but I think he's going to have a pretty significant tumble down the ranks, and he would be a nice sell-high type of a player. Kyrie's at 14, averaging 22, 4.5, and 8 with 2 steals. His steals are up this season. That seems to be a real thing. This is a relatively consistent-ish type performance from Kyrie, and the biggest surprise in this whole list, the only bloke who is rostered in under 80% of leagues, is Damo Dotson of the New York Knicks, and this is as fluky as it gets. 27 minutes for Dotson, 18 points with 3 triples, 3.3 rebounds, 0.3 assists, 1.7 steals, and he is shooting 68% from the field, including 71% from 3. He is a negative in rebounds, assists, and blocks, and his value is coming from the high steals, which are fluky, the high threes, which at 71% are fluky, the really high field goal percentage, which at 68% is nonsense. This guy was literally out of the rotation 3 games ago. He is absolutely fine to add in a 12-team league, but he is not this guy, so don't expect this. Number 16 is Joel Embiid, 25, 15, and 3, with half, 0.7 steals, 1.5 blocks, just pretty rock solid there. He's got some room to improve, though, from that area. Paulie George at 17, doing what he does, 22, 7.5, and 4, has dropped off with Westbrook back to be expected, and the efficiency at 42 is not that great. Townsy at number 18, 22.5 points, 11 rebounds for Karl Anthony Towns, 2.7 assists, which can improve, and his blocks have really dropped, just half a block over the last 2 weeks. That was really up at the start of the season. Since General Soreness has gone, his block numbers have decreased. That's the difference between him being the 18th ranked player and being the 5th ranked player. Getting to 3.5 assists and getting to 1.5 blocks, if he can do both of those things, because the efficiency's back, not quite the same, 50%. He was like a 56 guy last year. There is significant room for improvement for Towns, and I'd be counting on at least 2 of those 3 things improving. Number 19 is Bob Covington of the Minnesota Timberwolves as well. 15 points, 2.5 threes, 7 rebounds, a paltry 0.8 assists, but almost 3 steals and a block, and he's doing it while shooting 39.5% from the field. This is just peak Covington. It's just amped up in Minnesota because he's playing an additional 3 minutes per game. The steals are obviously high and they can probably reduce, but the other numbers are just really in line with what we've seen from Covington over the last couple of years. He is a legit fantasy basketball stud, and a top 40 finish is not unrealistic. And rounding out the top 20 is the former Minnesota Timberwolves, general soreness, Jimmy Butler. A lot of people are looking at him, oh man, what am I going to do with Butler in Philly? He's struggling. He's still the 20th ranked player, so I don't know what more you're expecting from him. Yes, 17.7 points aren't ideal, and it's because he's just not getting as many offensive touches. And this just shows how points rule everybody's thought process. Oh man, he's struggling, he can't get points. Oh, he's killing it, he's getting points. But Butler is still the 20th ranked guy. 17.7 points, 1.5 threes, 5 rebounds, 2.3 assists, 2.3 steals, 0.6 blocks, 45 and 93. And the thing you're seeing drop here is the usage, it's the scoring, and also the assist rate, which are all things that we thought would happen, especially the assists playing alongside Simmons, but still being able to maintain top 20 value by those steal numbers. Now, steals can be fluky, so if that drops to 1.7, then he could have a 20-25 spot fall, and that's fair enough. But I also think that the scoring, he's only doing it in 31.5 minutes as well, because the Sixers have been absolutely kicking everyone's ass. So I think that there's room for that to improve as well. The playing time, the scoring, and the assists can all go up. So I'm not really panicking on Butler. I'd look at him probably more as a third-round guy than a second-round guy at this point on his new team. That'll wrap it up for the top 20 players in fantasy basketball over the last 2 weeks. Guys, make sure you're subscribing. Hit that subscribe and the bell notification below. See ya.